doing business here tonight?
Yeah.
Is
He's always doing
this
business.
the resale?
This meeting of the Rolling Meadows City Council's Committee of the Whole is hereby called to order. There are a number of people on the sign-in sheet this evening for public comment, but for once, it happens to be about item number 1 instead of something further down the agenda that we have to move because of people who would like to speak. So unless there's something out there the chair is unaware of, I don't know of any motions to move anything around on the agenda. Are there any to do so? All right, then seeing none, we'll just start right in with number 1. Mr. Krumstock, I believe there's a brief staff introduction before South Bay comes up.
It's very brief. Obviously, we had a presentation back in January, which was more of the introduction. And at that point in time, obviously, South Bay Partners took a project that they're working on and sort of put it into the almost 12 acres that's called the Dominic's property. But then since then, they've actually done refinement, they've done some additional work, they've met with staff, and they're back at this point in time. And Adam Arnold will be doing a presentation with the rest of the team who's back that many of you will remember their names and remember their faces. The one thing that I do want to mention is that, again, Clark Street does still own the property. It is under contract with South Bay Partners. And again, when Clark Street actually owned it, they did a lot of advertising and looking for marketing by themselves, but they also use Kohler International to help them. And at this point in time, South Bay really came out from those marketing and actually is working. If I remember correctly, they've actually broken ground at this point in time at Lincolnwood. But again, this is another presentation to the City Council on this project, and if everything goes right, they are scheduled tentatively to be before the Plan Commission in July because they do need a text amendment for this PUD subdivision and rezoning. With that, I leave it up to Adam Arnold.
Then, Mr. Arnold, the podium is yours. Welcome back.
Good to be back. Thank you. Okay, so yes, thank you for having us back. We were here in January. I'm Adam Arnold. I'm with South Bay Partners. South Bay Partners is a senior living developer. What we do is assisted living, memory care, and independent living buildings. That's all we do. When we were here in January, it was largely to take a project that we're take a conceptual project that is going up in Lincolnwood, more or less adapt it to the Dominic site and go forward with that. What we've done since going through those initial steps with the city is get some feedback from planning, from city, from fire, and fold that into a similar concept, and you'll see the boards up as we go through here, so asking questions as we go through, but really adapt that concept of an independent living, assisted living, and memory care building specifically to the Dominic's site. Okay, so we'll go through a project overview today. The considerations that we're going to go through, design and civil, traffic and economic, really drove the building redesign and how it changed the layout of the site and the functionality of the building. And then we'll go through the updated design presentation and then open the, I guess we'll open the floor for questions this evening after we go through. I understand I have about 15 minutes, including questions, give or take. So we'll go from there. So one of the things that we really wanted to focus on for Rolling Meadows was the ability for the folks of Rolling Meadows to age in place. One of the things we've heard over and over and over again is that I grew up in Rolling Meadows. Maybe I went away, I went to school, I've come back. My family lives here. Several generations of my family live here. So we think this is a neat project for the city of Rolling Meadows because it allows people to stay here for the duration, for their duration. We'll have an independent living, assisted living, and memory care functionality to the building. We talked about this a little bit in January, and senior living is a spectrum of what that means to different folks in different parts of our industry. But an independent living is someone who elects to move in maybe downsize into a choice, a fully independent lifestyle. Assisted living are generally folks who need help with daily living. Maybe that's medication reminders, maybe that's bathing and dressing assistance as well. Memory care is its own functionality for memory impaired. Generally, that means Alzheimer's as the more or less a catch-all, but there's some other dementia that fall into memory care as well. And so those will be the three functionalities of the project that we've proposed. We've also looked at a fully licensable building. Independent living isn't always licensed by the Illinois Department of Public Health. Assisted living and memory care are, but given how population ages and supply and demand for those different segments change over time, we're looking at a building design that can flex based on that demand. So an independent living unit in the future may be an assisted living unit in the future, depending on what that population looks like going forward. And then we took into consideration parking, both the city requirements as they're written in the code, as well as what our historical experience is. And we've got a good team. We talked a lot about it in January. Like I said, South Bay is an independent, it's a senior living developer. It's all we do. But our architect and our construction company are here as well. And that's all they do as well, healthcare and senior living specifically. So given a lot of collective historical experience, the parking around the building is able to accommodate what we feel is in excess of what the city requires actually. There were some civil design considerations. So if you remember back to the building that we brought you in January, it really chewed up a big portion of the site, was very square to the site. There were some civil design considerations that we needed to take into consideration. Really, if you look at the way the site is oriented, it's a very tall Google view, if you will, but you'll see to the left-hand side of the slide there, the green area, that's the creek, and the site generally drains southwest towards that. So we had to have some building design considerations so that the water, as it rains, as it storms, is able to go around the building and get off site. In addition, I think we had to have close to, 4 acres of on-site detention. And you'll see in the layouts here that there's the southwest and southeast wrapping around corners are able to detain all of that on-site. So we won't be seeking any kind of off-site variations there. Additionally, it was important to be integrated into the community. It's a wonderful corner, especially for our use and being part of the community. Senior living is a very integrated part of the community in which they live, especially the independent and assisted. So having churches, flanking us basically on all sides, having a retail component right there. Senior living is generally accepted as a pretty good buffer between single-family residences, commercial, retail. So all of that, in our opinion, really flows well together. Our residents wind up being part of a community that's perfectly poised with all the action, if you will, with the community of the churches, the social centers, the retail centers, et cetera, that exist already. And so those pedestrian pathways that you'll see throughout the landscaping design tie our project to the community of Rolling Meadows, not our community. Fiscal considerations that we wanted to, were specifically asked, how did traffic impact the city of Rolling Meadows? How did the economics impact the city of Rolling Meadows? And as you can see here, there's very little parking, there's very little traffic that comes into play in regards to how a senior living operates. There's just not very many cars that come in and out of our facility because there's just not very many residents with cars. The economic impacts, you'll see what we did was imagined a retail center redeveloped there as opposed to our senior living developed on site here. The good thing about senior living for any community is that seniors have zero burden on the school system, period. We'll be an age-restricted community. 62 plus is generally how that is. I believe that's how it's written in the building code as well. Those folks don't have any kind of, any kids that would go into the school system there as well. Emergency services, similar to existing demand. This is actually something that I can update for you beyond the slide presentation that we sent earlier in the week, because we have a little better information than what we had earlier in the week. We were able to extrapolate with the help of fire what it would cost, the number of annual trips that would be generated above what we're currently experiencing in the city of Rolling Meadows. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 160 additional calls per year. If that is then extrapolated, that it would take 2 EMT responders who make $50 an hour, it's about $100 per trip for them to come out. We're looking at somewhere in the $15,000, $16,000 per year economic impact for the responses there. You'll see the estimated assessed value and tax implications that go along with that more than covers that. So I think what we'll see when we submit to the Planning Commission is a report that actually rounds that number up a little bit to an economic impact from EMT response to somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000 per year. What am I pointing at? Okay. This is our current site plan. So incorporating into kind of what we talked about already, we moved from what I referred to as kind of a standard H stick shift type layout to a pinwheel layout here. Again, the storm water flows are able to flow around the corners of the building. Do I have a pointer here, Barry?
Yeah, you do with the red light.
The red light? Okay.
But it might be really light. I'll play Vanna.
Okay. Thank you. So you'll in the bottom left, that's a detention area right there, the storm detention area. And then there's an L-shaped, or really more of a C-shaped on the right-hand side, Barry, of the wraps around. So we're able really to detain and treat all of our stormwater on site. So not a building amenity, but something I mentioned earlier that I want to discuss here. Those are only 2 points I wanted to point out, unless you would like to point. Beyond that, the building features will have multiple dining areas, multiple living areas inside the building for residents. Independent living has its own dining area. Assisted living has its own dining area, as does memory care. It's a very socially functional building. So we've got patios and courtyards and living areas and programming that will go along with those. Exercise facilities, you'll see a indoor pool built to the southern end of that north and south pinwheel right there. It's a community in and of itself, as well as a community that's connected to the city of Rolling Meadows. This is our landscape plan, so it colors up that site plan, what we're looking at already. Again, you'll see on the southeast and southwest corners, the detention areas, the trees at the end of all the parking lots, the courtyards that inherently exist inside each of those notches, inside of each of those V's. Specifically, the memory care wing is the Alzheimer's component is the one that moves east-west there. It has its own secured courtyard. Alzheimer's has an inherent wandering risk that goes along with that, so IDPH will require an enclosed courtyard there for those folks as well. And then you'll see where the parking garages, surface parking goes around and throughout the facility there as well. The same rendering, same view as the one we see here on the board, but this finishes the presentation is the last rendering view here as well. One thing we might talk about here in this last slide is we've done what we try to do with the concept here and the building elevations is tie to the community itself. I know there's a neo-traditional architectural element that is called out in code, and so we've tried to incorporate those elements that we've seen with the help of planning in the neighborhood to make a very residential style building. It's got the same kind of edifices, brick, stone facades, thin elegant balconies, landscaping, etc. Trimmed throughout to tie in the same way, in the same fashion we've seen other buildings built in the community that would be of similar size and stature. So, this is our plan for Rolling Meadows residents to be able to stay in Rolling Meadows as they age in place, as they remain part of their community and remain integrated into their community. It's not something that exists in the city today, in the community today, from an independent living, assisted living, and memory care perspective. There is some supportive living and some skilled nursing that exists in the community of Rolling Meadows. But we believe this is the answer to the independent assisted and memory care piece that doesn't exist today.
Then as information to the chamber, at this point, clarification questions only are in order from the council. Discussion among the council doesn't actually start until after folks who have signed in on the sign-in sheet for public participation get their turn at the microphone too. We simply think that's a way to respect the voices of everybody. To have everything out on the table before discussion begins. So among the city council, are there any specific questions for Mr. Arnold on what he's presented in this presentation this evening? Mr. Prana.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a very beautiful building, company. In the last 10 years, I've had to be a caregiver and guardian for 3 different members of my family, so I'm familiar with all 3 levels that you have there. So my question would be, how does this compare to, we have the Moorings, the Luther Village, Friendship Village. You mentioned Manicare, which has a different area. We have a memory care on Arlington Heights Road. So how would you compare those facilities that we have in the neighboring community with what your company's proposing?
Sure, a good question. That's a big part of our job, is to understand how supply and demand stacks up in the neighborhood. So several of the ones that you've mentioned, the Moorings, Presbyterian Village, et cetera, they're buy-in type communities. So when we're looking at what senior living means to different folks, there are different levels of independent living, just to seize on one of those. Ours is a pure rental structure, so people will pay month to month on what it costs to live there. It is not a exorbitant buy-in fee. You'll not pay several $100,000 up front to be a member of this community. It is an upper middle class type of resident who lives there. It is a substantial monthly fee that goes along with that. That's on the independent living side. It's a full service independent living building, and we'll talk about the assisted and the memory care as well. 3 meals a day are provided, programming is provided, and these are differentiators from a lot of what you're talking about there. Assisted living is an even higher level of care. So the skilled nursings and the supportive living facilities, that's a difference in what's provided there. Memory care, like you're talking about, is a much smaller component of our building. Right now, we've slated to have 20 memory care beds. So it's a smaller portion of our total building, but it would be similar to what exists in the marketplace. The marketplace is wholly underserved in all of these segments. Those facilities that you're talking about are their occupancies are incredibly healthy.
And you mentioned this is going to be totally rental. How would you compare the cost of rental here versus, because some of those facilities do have rental on Flossett. Could you just ballpark of what you're talking about rental for someone who's independent, assisted, memory?
Sure. Independent living units, one bedrooms will start at $2,800 a month. Assisted living units are, $4,850 starting per month. Memory care is $6,500 or more. So when I talk about a caliber of resident that is able to afford this kind of facility.
Okay. And then I guess my final question is that when folks run out of money, what happens next?
We're a rental facility. We'll do the best we can to work with those folks, but you pay to live there.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions on the presentation for Mr. Arnold? Mr. Judd?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, a fair amount of my questions were answered there. I guess one of them, if you could just elaborate, the assisted living is $4,800, and if you run out, I know like my grandparents were in those types of structures, not in this state, but in another state, and they got to the point where the entity was basically, when they ran out of money, they took either Social Security, Medicare, or whatever they did. Is that in your program, or when you're out of money, see you later?
I wouldn't pretend to be that callous that just see you later. It's hardly part of our program.
You work with them to find somewhere else for them to go.
The idea is for most folks don't live in assisted living. For example, average stay in memory care is less than 2 years. So that's something that we talk about very much on the front end. Our operators talk about very much on the front end of moving into this kind of facility, is understanding, how your finances are going to play out and doing the best we can to project and understand that. But at the end of the day, if you run out of money, you've run out of money. We'll do the best we can to hold you and work with you, throughout that process. But
essentially to move you to somewhere else.
There would be a need to be somewhere else. That's correct.
Okay. Excuse me. You brought up the AV, and I know that's a question I asked before. Could you go into, if not today, maybe at another point in time, how you determine that analysis?
Probably the best thing to do is we all share with you the full report. I only have that piece that I've put in front of you guys today. Our full report will be published with our Planning Commission submission. So if you'll allow me to table that until we submit, I'll have that full report
that's fine.
later this week.
And then I just want to confirm something. According to the write-up, that you guys have developed 65 of these structures and redeveloped 10 other structures. So that's a total of 75. How many of those do you currently own?
Patrick, we currently own 12. Okay.
And the other 63, were they, potentially sold to all for-profit entities or nonprofit entities, or a mixture?
All for-profit facilities.
That they were sold to? Mm-hmm. And they all remain that way?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, sir.
Okay, because I know that some of the other ones are nonprofit, which changes the scope of the...
Right.
Hi, I'm Patrick McGonigal at South Bay. I work with Adam. So South Bay's been developing senior housing facilities since 1994. So it's over the 20 years that we've had developed those properties, over 9,000 units. And yes, over time, they've been sold to for-profit entities, typically public or privately held REITs. Usually manager never changes, but then they've always been for profit. We're always in the
Okay, but there's no restriction to that, correct?
No. And just to go back to where people go if they run out of money in our facility, you also know in Illinois, there's the supportive living facilities, which if people eventually get on Medicaid, that's where Illinois' programs go for assisted living. You have one here called Plum Creek. That's generally, if you run out of money and you qualify for Medicaid, that's where you would go.
No, I'm fine with that aspect. I'm just more curious that, the way it's kind of, the way I'm perceiving it as being sold to me is people could move in there and it's basically where they can finish out their life, when in reality that's not the case. So that people that think, I'm going to sell my house in Rolling Meadows and be able to move into this place and live into perpetuity until I pass away, that's not the case. If they sell their house for $200,000 at $2,800 a month, that's going to last X amount of months. And if they live past that time, obviously they'll have other income. But I mean, if they live past that time, it's not that, at that point in time, Medicare kicks in and you guys take whatever Medicare or Social Security pays. It's they move to another structure.
Right. And
so that's kind of what I was trying to get to, is that, people don't have that perception. At least that's the way it's kind of, I'm hearing.
Yeah, and you're correct on that. And actually, Medicare will not cover independent living assisted or memory care. Medicare only covers skilled nursing. We do not have skilled nursing at this facility.
Okay.
Private pay, long-term care insurance will cover if you have that, but that's a resident's decision to buy long-term care insurance.
Right.
We will take that. That's their decision.
And do we, and I don't expect you to have this answer, but maybe somebody inside the city has, do we know how many people, and I don't know if anybody has this answer or if we could find out, is that Riverwalk was kind of sold on this same scenario type thing of people could move into Riverwalk and buy, not necessarily sell, rent, but buy. And I think that's kind of how Town Square was not structured, but, people suggested it, that how many people actually lived in those from Rolling Meadows, sold their houses and moved into them. I know that was one of the, I don't want to say catch-alls, but that's one of the things that people said was a great thing. We can sell our house, we can, downsize, we don't have to deal with yards and yada, yada, yada. I don't expect you guys to know it, but just to kind of see a gauge of, how many people are truly going to move in from Rolling Meadows, or if this is going to be a lot of Arlington Heights, Palatine, Inverness type things that, we're just, again, I'm just kind of thinking of how I'm perceiving as being sold to me, and what is, I don't want to say acceptable, but what I think is reality and what's not. So thank you at this time.
Further questions on the presentation? Mr. Diastis.
Yes. Mr. Arnold, you said there were going to be 20 beds, memory care. Can you tell me how many independent and assisted?
Yeah, it's 220 units of independent living, 45 of assisted living, and 20 are memory care.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Further questions on the presentation? Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your very professional presentation. Appreciate it. A couple quick questions. So I just want to make sure, so you're not going to have any skilled nursing there.
Correct.
Which can be a big issue in a unit like this. So anytime anybody needs skilled nursing, they're going to need to be transferred out of that facility, correct?
Correct.
So you guys will develop a relationship with Manor Care or someone else to
Yes,
take
sir.
your patients. Okay. The other thing is you talked about some of the financials. So you gave us two prices, one $2,800, one the other one $4,500.
Mm-hmm.
So when people accept that, what do they have to pay as a down payment to get in?
There'll be a monthly deposit, or a community fee, a one-time deposit, $2,000, $3,000.
So nothing tens of thousands or anything like that?
No, sir.
deposit.
That becomes that kind of buy-in community, I think, is what you're getting to. Generally, the buy-in communities, the moorings, et cetera, have a several $100,000 oftentimes buy-in, flat fee buy-in, and then a monthly kind of country club expense that goes along with that covers meals and services and those kinds of things. This is without that initial buy-in. There's a kind of one-time application community fee.
Okay. And then you mentioned the other facilities around us that are being built right now. To my knowledge, and you know it better than I do, correct me if I'm wrong, the new facility in Arlington Heights, it's on Arlington Heights Road and Gulf Road, isn't that all dementia patients?
Yes.
And then Palatine's building a new 200-bed one at the corner of Palatine and Quinton and Dundee that they've applied for and been approved, right next to the mobile station there.
Right.
So that's,
Independent living?
no, that's dementia living from what they published.
Okay, where is it?
Quinton Road in Dundee.
Independent as memory care.
Right.
So that's so you had asked where are residents going to come from?
Right.
And so what we've done as far as determining what we think is supply and demand is what we think is a very tight concentric ring, 3 miles, give or take. So that's when we think our residents are going to come from. We've identified a much larger need in independent living and assisted living than anything else. Memory care is a big part of what we do and a good complement to this building, but I think what you're getting to, a big limiting factor is amount of memory care that is in the market. So we think memory care is a good complement to our building. We think it's a good complement to what the city needs, but it is the smallest portion of our building for that reason.
Okay. And last question, just I was curious with your design.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'll just add to that. You know, originally we wanted to put more memory care, but we saw a lot of memory care development in the area, and that's why we lowered it down to 20 beds. And quite honestly, the 20 beds will be filled within the building from residents that move from independent living and assisted into our building. So we're really not envisioning long-term to draw from the outside as much as people age in place within the building, and let the others that are developing the memory cares in the surrounding areas and let them serve that market.
Okay.
Just minimize the amount of memory care.
Just a couple more quick questions. I noticed on your overall plan, it looks like there's only like 16 garages for the whole facility. I've been with probably 4 or 5 of these kind of units. Every one that I've ever been in always had a major underground facility for parking. So residents don't have to go out in the middle of winter and stuff like that. It doesn't look like you guys have put any of that in.
I'd like to have as many garages as I can.
But how about underground the building themselves?
It would be going underground here would be cost prohibitive.
But you only have 16 garages for protected covered.
Correct.
Okay, that seems to be really small to me. I mean, a lot of these people struggle to get to their cars. Some of them probably shouldn't be driving, as we all know. But it's I've had a lot of experience with these kind of facilities in the last 10 or 15
29
years.
garage spaces.
Oh, it just looked like there was only 4 buildings. Looked pretty small. Anyhow, that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
We'll talk later.
Further questions on the presentation? Mr. Prana again.
Thank you. As you're marketing this, obviously, what is because I mentioned other facilities, the medium income of people that you expect to be renting to your facility?
Median income?
I mean, you're targeting a specific market with a specific income that can cover these monthly costs. So that must have been part of the marketing plan when you decided to come here.
I wouldn't say that part of our interview process for admitting somebody would be falling above or below a certain threshold, but part of the admissions process is talking with prospective residents about what their assets and what their incomes look like for the remainder of what they what is average rest of life. So that's a very kind of one-on-one kind of conversation with each of the prospective residents and their families, making sure that they have the assets to address the rest of it.
But I think to drill down more, when we do our demographic analysis, we're looking at age income qualified people, anyone over the age of 75 that has income greater than $25,000 a year. And you say, okay, well, $25,000 a year doesn't cover your building. Well, as much as the resident paying for the unit is as much the kids of also supporting the resident, and income doesn't count assets. So but what we look at is over age of 75, $25,000 of income per year as what we use for our demographics to decide if there's enough demand.
So, okay, 25,000. Okay.
But if you think about that, if you're on Social Security, I mean, our residents are not working anymore. So most of them do not have that much income. So really it's assets.
Correct.
And then Social Security, and then family members, young children of, supporting them for their rental payments.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions on the presentation? Ms. Majakis?
Thank you, Mayor. When you're sitting down with these potential tenants, you're looking, like you have them sign year leases, multi-year?
Yeah, 6 and 12-month leases are pretty normal.
6 and 12 months?
For independent living, but now the typical market for assisted living and memory care is month to month.
Okay.
And you can, because those residents' health changes rapidly, you could die, you might need to go to skilled nursing. So industry standard is assisted living and memory care month to month. Independent living can be a trick, like a multifamily lease, 6, 12 months. If you want a shorter lease, you might pay a little bit more, but those are more traditional multifamily type structures. But AL memory care is month to month.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions on the presentation? Then seeing none, now is the point where the floor would be open to the public. As a quick introduction to the members of the public, generally speaking, the time limit per person is 5 minutes, and the time limit for public comment on any given item in a committee of the whole is 25 minutes. There are 9 people who are signed in, and 9 times 5 is not 25. Well, okay.
10 times 5.
Kind of late, but we'll get everybody in that we can. So now we have 10. So the thing that I would like to ask of you is that you keep in mind that you're sharing minutes with other folks. I will assure you that if people aren't continually bumping up against 5 minutes, I probably won't notice if we happen to go over 25 or anything else along those lines. I'll keep only one blurred eye on the clock as long as there's an effort to share some time. So if I could just ask you to keep that in mind, we'll play things by ear as we move through as many folks as we can within the time allotted. The first person on the sign-in sheet is Joanne Grassi. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Rooney and City Council. My name is Joanne Grassi, and I've been a resident since 2005. I am here tonight because many people I know are in favor of the senior living development. In fact, my mother-in-law drives by all the time and asks me when it's going to be completed. It's been 12 long years since Dominic's has closed. There's a great clock on the wall. This clock has no numbers, just one word, and that word is now. We need to do something now. Plus, it would be nice to include a post office as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for taking the time to express your thoughts. The second person on the list is Jim Murphy. Mr. Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Jim Murphy. I am a 50-year resident of Rolling Meadows. I now currently live one block over in Arlington Heights, but I still consider myself a resident, very attached to the city. I moved to Rolling Meadows with my parents in 1963 when I was 18 months old. I'm very much attached to that site, the Dominic site, as it's called. My first ever job that I had was working as a stock boy at Woolco Department Store there on that Dominic site. So very much attached to that location, but I'm here to be an advocate that I think that site should remain or return as either some type of retail or as an economic, or I'm sorry, not economic, but some type of an entertainment facility or area. It seems that was closer to the original design or vision of Kimball Hill for that entire stretch of Kirchhoff Road to be set up as retail and entertainment. And it seems like all the spaces that come down, either the bowling alley, a long time ago was the theater, seems has all been replaced with residential housing. And it just seems like that one site should remain or return to some type of retail or entertainment. The other reason I'm here is also there's a site on Facebook. I'm not sure if any of the, if you're familiar with it. I know I've been working with Valerie with it. The site is called Growing Up in Rolling Meadows, Illinois. It was started by a classmate of mine. And on that was posted the last story that was in the Daily Herald about the prospects for that site, or, I think South Bay was mentioned. And to date, I think there was probably maybe 400 comments that have been posted to former residents, people like myself who grew up in Rolling Meadows. I could say probably 99% of the comments favor that site returning to some type of retail or entertainment type of a business. I don't have all the specifics of where it's at. I've heard with Clark and where everything is at and all that, but that's something I'd be in favor of. And I came here today because I was putting comments on there too, so I didn't want to be one of those people who just pounded their chest behind a keyboard and didn't come out and actually try to, say something about it. So there's many other things I could add, but I know the time is limited, so I just wanted to say, that's my opinion, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir, for appearing before the council. The next person on the sign-in sheet is Mr. Rob Williams. Mr. Williams?
Thank you. I've been a resident here in Rolling Meadows since about 1973, and president of the Chamber of Commerce for a while, and I appear here tonight just to simply add my voice to the council giving up its idea of developing a retail establishment or any type of retail function on that property, since 10 years of searching have not gotten us anywhere, and the viable business community around or in Rolling Meadows seems to have moved to Algonquin Road. I think that a good use of this would be exactly what is proposed. I'm very close to needing that myself, being at 77 and retired. But I watched Sears Roebuck fail there. We have watched Crawford's go there. We have seen any number of organizations not survive, including small restaurants. Some small attempts at entertainment, and the post office obviously coalescing and going over to Arlington Heights. I don't think that it's just my personal opinion and the opinion of a number of people in Fairfax Village, where I live, that this retail is not a viable alternative for that property anymore, no matter how much we would want it, which we all do. And we'd like to have the council look at this from the standpoint of not letting that property go to waste for another 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for taking the time to come this evening. The next person is Mr. Glenn Terrace. Mr. Terrace?
Thank you for having us, listening to our opinions. I agree with the gentleman that was just up here. He's a member of your Chamber of Commerce. If you don't buy into what he's saying, I don't know who else you're going to buy into. This community here, I've been a member of this community since 1986. So I've been here for 30 years. I raised my kids here. My kids don't live here anymore, but they've gone on to do other things. But I've been here for 30 years. And nostalgia is nice. Like the other gentleman said, oh, it's nice to think about what this place was like 30 years ago when I moved in here. Yeah, Crawford's was here, and we had other businesses in town here in the downtown area. But you got to face reality. And reality is brick and mortar stores are going out of business. And you're not going to bring businesses here to downtown Rolling Meadows. If you think that's going to happen, you're in la-la land. This is a win-win. This is a win for the taxpayers, and it's a win for the older citizens of Rolling Meadows. Now, somebody asked, are the people going to be here living in Rolling Meadows? No, it's open to anybody. But I would imagine that most people who have mom and dad who are getting older are going to want a place to put their parents as they get older. And the population in this Rolling Meadows community is getting older. It's not getting younger. You can look at all the homes in the community here, and they're getting older. Some of the new homes are coming up here, and thank God we're getting these homes built right over here by the library. What's the name of the community? Lexington? Well, hopefully those people will come in and shop at Jewel, and they'll shop at Hallmark, and they'll shop at the stores here. But you're not going to get Like the gentleman from the Chamber of Commerce said, your major markets now are over there on Algonquin Road, or they're over at Woodfield, over there at Myers. They're not going to come down to Kirchhoff. And, you know, I like to be nostalgic too, but you got to face reality. And this is what reality is. Every time I go by that blighted area, because it's blighted, it's empty. We've got other stores in the area that are empty. And let's do something with the property. Let's improve our tax base by leaving it empty there for 12 years. Are you kidding me? And you're still going to wait for somebody to come in here and say, "Oh, what are we going to put in there? We're going to bring Dominic's back?" I don't think so. So I think you ought to face reality. A lot of people here have given great opinions, and I sympathize with the man with the nostalgia attitude, but you got to face reality. That's in the past. So I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for appearing before the council this evening. The next person is Andrew B. Mr. B.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I came to listen. We're going to be neighbors with whatever goes in there. I pastor the church right next door at Meadows Christian Fellowship, and so I was here to hear some of what the plan is. I've interacted very limitedly with Adam and with people from Clark Street. And our church is made up of young and old. It's made up of some people that would use this facility and some that would really like to see some form of entertainment or retail. I've read the marketing study, and so I understand the challenges. And so as my questions have been answered, thank you, Adam, and from some of your questions here tonight, I would just like to publicly encourage any praying person in Rolling Meadows to pray for the city council. You guys have had some rough stuff lately. You don't get paid a lot. You come here and you do your best, and it's always divisive. There's never a winner around the table. And so as a pastor in the community, as a resident in the community, I would just like to call the residents of the city of Rolling Meadows that pray to pray for you. Thank you.
We appreciate those thoughts, Pastor B. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person is Mr. Mike Lynch. Mr. Lynch, his information in the chamber, there are roughly 15 minutes left on the public participation clock.
We're cool. I did this for 40 years. I know how to move things along. I don't have the nostalgia. I've only lived here for 11 years now. But to the earlier point with regards to retail, you only need to look at the fourth quarter national numbers on retail. Even with Black Friday and Christmas, they were abysmal. And the most recent announcement on the first quarter numbers, looking at Macy's and the other big box stores, they were also abysmal. And then you look at Sunday's announcement that was publicized on Monday, where Amazon is now going to offer clothing and its own private label foodstuffs. You know, once again, it's the reality of retail today. So looking for retail, I don't think it's going to happen either. My personal reason for being here tonight is my eyes weren't good enough to see the slide, but I'm concerned about revenue. Mr. Berrios decided to increase my assessed value by 26%, which means you all will be getting more of my money without even having to vote on it. And I would hope that the council looks hard at other opportunities to bring revenue-generating functions into the city to help those of us that are trying to pay our taxes. And with that in mind, this looks like a very good project, and I would hope the council takes the next step to view this as a potential catalyst in terms of what does this and the Lexington do to help us develop a part of the city away from Gulf Road in a way that, again, generates revenue, provides services to the city residents. You know, can it be a potential downtown Des Plaines, downtown Arlington Heights, where we've seen, I mean, I look at Ben Franklin Bank. You know, something's going right that they're looking to expand out in the mall. And then separate from this, but somewhat aligned, and it's not something that can be answered tonight, is I would like to know, and there may be a plan out there that I haven't found on the website, but what is the city's economic development plan And to what degree, having sat on the other side of siting decisions, that is, why do we go to this town? Why don't we go to that town, et cetera? I'd like to know, as a resident, just what does the city do to, A, make itself attractive, and B, to whom, and C, how is it you are reaching out to those prospective taxpayers to attract them and to invest in the city? Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for taking the time to come this evening. The next person on the sign-in sheet is Deborah Hollish. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would like to add my input in favor of building an aging-in-place facility using the old Dominic's building. Rolling Meadows has lived with this eyesore for approximately 10 years without any success of finding a retail business willing to buy or improve the property. I've talked to many people in the area, and they agree with me. It is now time to forget about trying to find retail stores and accept a business that is willing to improve the property. Although the business will not be generating tax revenue, I'm sure many of the people who will be living there will be taking advantage of the retail shops across the street. They'll be buying groceries at Jewel, they'll be buying cards from Hallmark, and even buying pizza at Little Caesars. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. The next person on the sign-in sheet, I know it's not a coincidence, is Steve Hollish.
The council has 5 minutes together.
Yeah, 5 minutes. Only one. Yeah, being under the same roof, it's kind of like, yeah, we have the same visions.
The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've heard a lot of good things here prior to me coming up here about trying to improve this and trying to go forward. And I think the best thing I've heard so far is, yeah, let's look at trying to draw more into the city. Try and get better things from this. And I think this is an excellent way to do it, that you have a new facility, it's modern looking, it does good for the downtown area, so it would attract more people just for that fact that it's something new and exciting. So going forward, I hope that the council looks at that and approves it and goes forward and lets them build this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next person on the sign-in sheet is Mr. Mark Ostrand. Mr. Ostrand, the microphone is yours, sir.
I'm Mark Ostrand. I've been living in Rolling Meadow for 40 years. I came out of Evanston. I lived in other places that had the same problem. I worked downtown Des Plaines. When I was working downtown Des Plaines, they were talking about beautifying the place. I went back there a couple of days ago. That garage is gone. It's now built where the site of the old mall is. Okay, everybody talked about Dominic's, Safeway, and all that. I lived out in California. I know about that store. I know about Dominic's. I lived in Illinois most of my life. Okay, I'm looking at the future. You're talking about the kids, you're talking about the older generation. We all have to have a place to go. If it's a care, which my parents are now living at, Friendship Village. My last name is Ostrand. My dad is G. Walter Ostrand. I can get a hold of him on information on some of this stuff because he was a spokesman for many years. When that new building went up, I don't want to get involved with that. I've been in retail for so many years. I've been going back to Dominic's. I would like to see something come in for everybody. Restaurants, game place, you talk about the kids, even the fire department is falling apart. You may want to build a little bit on the site there and make the other one. Fort Wayne did that with a firehouse that's older and is now a museum. That's another place, Fort Wayne, Indiana. They had the downtown doing the same thing. Everything is moving out. In the future, you're going to have more computer. Everybody's going to be on retail for computer. You see that a lot with the change of what's the situation. You got to look what is in the future. That's why I'm here. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, sir, for taking the time to come out this evening. The last person on the sign-in sheet, Ms. Patty Callahan?
That's me.
Fair enough. Ms. Callahan, as you come up to the microphone, could I trouble you, please? The rules do require that we have your address on record.
It's 3400 Wellington Court.
Thank you. Okay. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Okay. Mayor Rooney and Council, I live in Riverwalk condos, and as you can tell out the window, we have an empty lot there. In the plans originally, before the project went bankrupt, that was to be a senior housing unit. In those 3 buildings in Riverwalk condos, there are already many seniors living there. In my building alone, we have many seniors. And I hear the dollar amounts that you guys are looking at to charge rents. I can tell you, my 80-year-old mom who's lived here for 50 years, there's no way that she can afford your rental fees. And knowing many of her friends that she congregates at the Jewel with on a daily basis, those rental fees are very, very high. And many of the seniors in this area, they are living on Social Security, many of them, and they're staying in their homes for one reason, and that is because they're paid for, and they want to stay in their homes for as long as they can. And that's so. My question is what can we do to finish improving that empty lot that's sitting at Riverwalk as well? Because, I've seen the plans. It was meant to be a 4-story building, and it's empty. And I myself would prefer to have, retail, I understand. I'm an online shopper myself. Big box it's going to the wayside, unfortunately. They struggle and everything. I am an online shopper. I like the convenience. I'm on my phone or my iPad, and in a day or two, it's here. Some days, if I'm before noon, Amazon, some of it's here before 8 o'clock that evening. But maybe another type of a grocery store. I've been to, was it Fresh Time? Those are amazing grocery stores. And then there's a new chain that's out of Ohio. It's called Heinen's. I go to Barrington for some of my groceries. There are other options, but I would like to have nice sit-down restaurants as well. And then you talk about a sense of community. You've got your seniors gathering at the Jewel, drinking their little cups of Papa Nicholas because they have nowhere else to go. There's only so many sit-down tables at McDonald's because they themselves are looking for a sense of community, and they don't have one. And that's it. So I would love, like I said, I would love to see some restaurants, maybe some small retail. Maybe the alternative would be to raise that property and have whoever owns it say, here, it's an empty lot. Maybe parcel it off. But I would really like to see some restaurants, maybe smaller retail, or just something else with it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for taking the time to appear before the council this evening.
Thank you.
Ms. Callahan was the last person on the sign-in sheet, and the time is coming up to where there wouldn't be any more time left anyway, fairly shortly. Therefore, without objection, we'll close the discussion from the floor, and the council can move to full discussion of item number 1 on the agenda. I'd like to briefly start by just making the observation that lots of people are talking about this, and as I bump into folks, people will say, well, what do you think? What do you think? Are you in favor of it, or are you against it? And my answer to folks that I know fairly well is, well, personally, I happen to think it's a fine idea, but I don't think that's the right question. I bore everybody to death with the fact that I'm an economics guy, and what we have is a duly arrived at agreement between an owner who wants to sell his property to another completely reputable owner. And when projects come to the city with their hand out and say, what can you give us, what can you give us, what kind of tax incentives can we have, that's when the city gets leverage to weigh in with its opinion on what people get to do with their property, in my never-changing economic opinion. And as we discussed before, I believe the ask on this is extremely small. It's asking to do something that was already done once before and simply return the zoning status to something that would accommodate this property. I don't think that gives the city council more than the teeniest, tiniest bit of leverage to weigh in on what's going to happen. That's my economic opinion, but it's also my government opinion. I generally believe that government is sticking its nose into all kinds of stuff, and it seems ironic to say that when you're at the local level of government, because getting permits comes from us and following the building code comes from us, and people think that there's lots of nitpicky rules that we're enforcing all the time. But those are done so that the next property owner can come in and know where the studs are going to be and know where the outlets are going to be and how much spacing is going to be and so forth and so on. It's all meant to facilitate the getting of property out of one hands when the property owner wants to sell it into the hands of the new owner who wants to buy it. And so I hope folks won't think I'm oversimplifying, but to me, the question that I would ask me if I wasn't the mayor is not, what do you think? My question would be, on what grounds does the city get to say, no, we don't want you to sell to that person, we want you to look for other people? I have a test question on my Unit 1 test for my kids in economics, where the quotation is about when profits are falling, that's the market grabbing a business owner by the collar and shaking him, and that prices are signals. Dominick's has been shaking us by the collar for 12 years, and Clark Street says, I want to sell my property to somebody else who's got a good use for it. It doesn't need to be the highest use. It doesn't need to be the best use. It doesn't need to be the preferred use. It needs to be a use that's legitimate. And beyond that, if they're not asking for anything, I don't really believe we have a lot of room to dictate what goes where. That's my own take on it. I open the floor to discussion from the council. Mr. Banjer.
Thank you. I'm in support of this. I was in support of it when they came in January. I just think it's the right thing to do, and I'm on the same side as some of these speakers. It's time to move on. Nothing has worked there for a long, long time. Something's better than nothing, and I think there's, as the gentleman mentioned, there is a demand, a desire, a need in paying customers for this type of residence. So I'm all for it. Thanks.
Mr. Wiedmas.
Yeah, I've the last time we discussed this, I was for it, and I'm still for it. I do also have the heartstring that a lot of people have. I'd love to see retail. You know, I'd love to see another supermarket. I'd like to see some competition for our Jewel and all that. But at the end of the day, after 12 years, the market is showing that we don't have enough traffic in our off of Kirkhoff Road to support that. So whether it's small, you know, the Plaza Lane and all the rest of it, that's just the way reality has gone. So I'm live in the private sector myself, and the private sector is saying that this is a market that can be utilized for that space. So I'm in support of it right now.
Further discussion among the council. Mr. Prana.
Well, this is where the mayor and I butt heads from time to time. I've heard what, excuse me, and I've heard about market forces, and I've heard about, you know, the economic engine that we're looking for, and it is a free market society. I mean, we have had, you know, we talked about, someone brought up Sears Hardware. Well, you know, Sears Hardware came in and the city was all excited, and we went from having 2 hardware stores to 0 hardware stores. And things have changed, you know, the movie theater is gone, the bowling alley's gone, we've put condos. So, I mean, we have, as a city, moved and changed with the economics of the times. We've been fortunate that when the hardware store went out, that, at least there's something there now, not exactly what we wanted. Some things we can't predict. I understand what the mayor is saying is two people want to go into a business transaction, and that's the private sector, and that's great, but this is also about, I feel, about community and the future of the city, because it's not just one person buying property and saying, I'm just going to use this property. We need the city to change what the use and what the layout of the city has been for the years. And I've brought this up before. I know that there's some people that just want to do something. Don't care what it is, just build something, tear it down, make it a park. I don't really care. And then I have conversations with people in Schaumburg and Wheeling and Buffalo Grove, where they're now spending millions of dollars trying to develop a downtown area that we already have. I know it's frustrating. I know it's been 12 years. But it's about community, it's about the future of the city. And then when I asked about what the costs are, it is about the community, what benefits it is for residents. And when I see that it's $2,800 a month for independent and $4,850 for assistant and $6,500 for memory care, and as I'd mentioned, over the last 10 years, I've had to be the executor and power of attorney, and I've had to move people over those various parts, and I can tell you that they started out at that level, but they went up at a quite, they beat inflation, let's just put it that way. And I know I'm in the minority, and I'm willing, in fact, I'm meeting with these folks tomorrow afternoon. I'm willing to go forward. As I mentioned before, if they could have done something to help bring even a restaurant, something along that area, because that's what I hear from folks. Because once this piece of property is gone, it's gone. That's it. It's there, and everyone here at the table is entitled to their opinion. I just look at the fact that, as the pastor said, we need to do a whole lot of praying for the city, and we need for residents to come forward and let us know, because tonight was just a small group of folks. So as of right now, I do not favor moving forward with the project. Thank you.
Further discussion among the council. Mr. Judd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard a lot of things and just want to make sure that my understanding is correct. But, the Dominic site's been there for 12 years. But in reality, I would argue it hasn't, in the sense that for 8.5 of those years, you had an owner that was demanding a significant premium for the property. He wanted $9 million. There's a reason nobody paid it. The only people that tried to was Bristol, who was another apartment complex. And then the only way they were going to make it work is to go to the school districts and get tax abatements. That's the only way they could afford to pay the premium, and that's why the thing sat vacant for 9 years. They had a lease signed with Dominic's, and they paid it. There was no incentive for that owner to do anything with that piece of property. If I was the owner, I wouldn't have done anything with that piece of property. So that brings us down to 3.5 years, which is when Clark Street took over it, and they took it out of receivership for, I believe it was $1.7 million. And at that point in time, you had one of the premier, or at least one of the larger firms that is in retail. And I know from my position, I was very much in favor of them being able to do something. They tried to bring Uncle Joe's in. I was against that, just primarily because I think we were giving too much away. That being said, they tried for a number of years to get something. What they did is irrelevant to me. They tried, and they didn't get it. I think, as Alderman Prana said, market forces have dictated certain things. I think they've dictated that is not going to remain as a structure the way it is. Now, some could argue, if I was going to rent that place and I was talking to Clark Street and I drove by, I'd say, no way am I going to put anything in there. It's a dilapidated old building. They made the decision to not spend any money on it. I think it was an incorrect decision, but it's not my building, so they can do whatever they want. That being said, I think that, you know, the city needs to look at things from what's best for everybody involved for the long term. You know, the thing is, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that, you know, that was originally, you know, allowed for a PUD for apartments. I was never in favor of that. I know nobody on this council at that point in time voted for it because nobody was here. That doesn't mean that that can't change, but they weren't here. I would argue that, you know, in the past, people have made the city's made significant mistakes. There was probably very valid reasons for it. I wasn't around for any of them, but, you know, Woodfield wanted to be part of Rolling Meadows, or we had the opportunity to annex Woodfield Mall. Arlington Park wanted to be part of Rolling Meadows. We, you know, the council at the time, or the mayor at the time, you know, or the people involved, dictated that that wasn't the proper thing to do for, again, whatever reason. Hindsight, obviously, is always crystal clear. You know, it was a big mistake. So what we kind of have to do is look at and say to ourselves, okay, is this something we want for the long term? It's an apartment complex. It's nothing more than that. Whether it's considered senior apartment complex or memory care, it's an apartment complex. This can be sold to anybody at any point in time. I think, again, history, not saying it's going to repeat itself, but Woodfield Gardens was a pretty nice apartment complex at one point in time. Unfortunately, it was sold to somebody that made it so it wasn't such a nice apartment complex at the time. Now it's back to somebody it's, from my understanding, a pretty decent apartment complex again. But that being said, we lose all control of a significant structure and a significant piece of property, you know, in downtown Rolling Meadows. Well, what some people consider downtown, which is almost essentially dead. But that being said, you know, if we look at some of the communities around us, Mount Prospect, Arlington Heights, Palatine, they've all revitalized their downtowns. They've done it primarily through owner-occupied structures. They've all had train stations there before for a number of years, so that didn't change. The only thing that changed, I mean, Arlington Heights, for example, had 55 South Vale, large apartment complex. Didn't do much. They started building condos, and you ended up with a different caliber person that decided to frequent stores more. And they've also done some other things. I don't know how the whole thing was set up with Randhurst, but that was, you know, a huge structure, somewhat similar, obviously different, but it was going by the wayside. People were getting rid of, you know, they wanted to get rid of it. Somehow somebody, and I don't know if it was the city got involved or just private sector, changed what that occurred. And you've got now a situation where it's a mixed use piece of property. And from the times that I've been over there, it seems to be a very vibrant mixed use piece of property. And I think there's other places around here like that. I think that at times that government needs to take somewhat of a leadership position in those things. I'm not saying it's the council that hasn't done that. I'm not saying it's the staff that hasn't done that. I think we all were in agreement that Clark Street was going to be able to do something if anybody was going to be able to do it. Again, why they weren't able to, I don't know. Maybe they're charging too much. Maybe they're talking to the wrong people. Maybe they just said we bought it for 1.7. We'll wait for the market to go up and we'll sell it for $4 million and make our money that way. I don't know. But I think, you know, the people that I've spoken to, you know, are very much interested in some sort of mixed use development. You know, they've said we'd love to keep retail. I've said the market's basically told us that staying 100% retail is not going to occur. I could be wrong, but that I don't think it's going to. But I think taking the next step and saying, okay, well, we're going to go back to 100% residential, and then something that could end up at a nonprofit organization. Not saying it is, but I know part of Luther Village is. We could end up with no tax revenue at this if somebody were to buy it that's nonprofit. I think if we want to get into changing what we perceived that we wanted into some sort of mixed use piece of parcel with residential and retail, maybe we're supposed to, talk to Clark Street and offer them a put on the property or something like that and figure out what works best for the community as a whole and what the residents are interested in. The people I've spoken to have not been, they're not interested in the apartment complex. They are interested. There is a demand for people that, are getting older. I don't disagree with any of that. I don't disagree with, the people say that retail's not going to survive there because on its own, it's not going to. But I think there's other avenues, and, I've been opposed to apartment complexes for a long period of time. I remain opposed. Thank you.
Further discussion from the council? Mr. Crumstock, there's not any particular direction that's necessary this evening because the next step is to go to the Plan Commission. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And without any further discussion from the council, seeing none, we'll consider the discussion on item number 1 concluded. That'll bring us to item number 2, the emergency management overview, kind of an annual, dictate that we have from both the federal and the state government to make sure we receive a certain number of minutes of training. So I hate to be cynical as we bring you up, Scott. Sorry, it's not about the training. I assure you, it's about the minutes requirement.
It's about the image up there,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah. Well,
so, Chief, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. As you mentioned, Mayor, this is our annual refresher training of emergency management and the specifically the training requirements for the elected officials, as well as just a refresher overview of the concept of emergency management. And I'm going to turn the podium over to firefighter paramedic Ben Dwyer, who, in addition to his duties with the fire department, he serves as the chair of our city's emergency planning team, which is a group of city staff representing the various departments within the city, and they do the nuts and bolts of emergency management preparedness for the city in terms of maintaining our emergency operation plan and maintaining our emergency operations center and overseeing the training that staff is required also, in addition to the training that you're going to get today. So as I hand out a couple handouts with some other training options for your interest, I will turn the podium over to Ben Dwyer to conduct the training this year.
You drew the short straw, huh, Ben?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Chief. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. Yourself?
Doing very well, thank you. So what Chief was talking about is basically what emergency management is. Whenever you hear emergency management, think it's a common sense approach to managing risk or disaster. What we like to think of is we like to maintain the forward-leaning posture against any kind of threat that could potentially affect the daily business of the city of Rolling Meadows. So tonight we're just going to go over a couple things: overview of National Incident Management System, what NIMS is, how it ties into emergency, how it ties into incident command, operations, logistics, etc. The framework that we use within the city here, and the roles and responsibilities of the elected officials as well as senior staff and leadership. So if this ever happens, the first conversation we have hopefully isn't after a tornado rolls down Central Road. So that's why we're here. NIMS ICS, it's developed in the 1970s based off FireScope. It's from the West Coast. What they did was they created a framework that's scalable, stageable, where you can take it from a single house fire all the way up to a multi-state response to a wildfire. It's actually where it came from. So West Coast said it was a good idea. It was adopted by the federal government in 2003 through HSPD 5. So Homeland Security Presidential Directive number 5, that was with Bush. Number 5 and number 8 are really what turned it around for local municipalities. Number 5 said, have common language, have common operating picture, and use the same kind of structure. Number 8 said, you're going to have 5 mission critical points. So we call them 5 mission areas. So it's prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. And it's actually a cycle. So once that's completed, you go right from recovery back to prevention. So it's ever evolving, constant assessments, constant threat assessments, so we can see what's on the horizon. Before it was a new mattered fault. Now it's going back to terrorism with everything that's been happening throughout the world. We emphasize partnerships. Everything starts local and ends local. So whether that's a non-government official, faith-based organizations, et cetera, specifically Red Cross, Salvation Army, and response special teams, we coordinate to make sure that people get what they need. We don't actually run the show. We go up to you and say, hey, what you need? Let's make this happen. Basically, if you need food, water, shelter, special teams will get it for you. Depending on the surge capacity of the municipality as well as the threshold for damage, depends on how far up the food chain it goes. So it starts local, goes to county, goes to state, goes to federal, and then can get scaled all the way back down. Just because it goes to federal doesn't mean that it's going to be a FEMA disaster. We may just ask for federal teams. Say if it's something specific like a chemical biological agent, we would have to have feds come in to assist because we don't have that kind of capability. Again, it's all about the specific surge capacity. NIMS system, talking about preparedness, communications, resource management. So critical resource management, depending on what you're being faced with, depends on what you're actually going to need. The city committed to adopt NIMS into our local jurisdiction. This is not a cost make area. We don't make money off of adopting these things. This is a cost savings measure, so it's a stop loss. So if we're going for reimbursement through FEMA grants, or if we declare a disaster, the first thing they're going to say is, are you compliant? So if we are compliant, we're actually reimbursed at a higher rate. So it behooves us to maintain our compliance, make sure that, again, we're maintaining the forward-leaning posture. We committed to, in 2004, to use NIMS for fire and rescue incidents, severe weather disaster incidents, of which we've actually been seeing more of, hazardous material incidents, large-scale criminal acts, terrorism incidents, and major planned events. As Chief was talking about the emergency planning team, we have been coming up with emergency operations plans for fireworks, farmers and food trucks, any kind of event that has the potential to turn bad. We're not conspiracy theorists, we're not negative people, we're not expecting fire and brimstone to come down from the sky. However, things do happen. Look at Prospect Heights, and it could be as simple as a fire. Prospect Heights, their city hall burned down. If you don't have plans in place to deal with those things, your recovery time is going to be significantly delayed. We just completed our continuity of operations planning for the city, and for those of you who are in the private sector, it's very similar to business continuity plans. So what are your essential functions? What do you need to have to make sure that you can, complete those essential functions to maintain your functionality? How can we still support our community? How can we still maintain our community? There we go. All right, so going to NIMS, it looks like a wire chart. You're going to see a few of these later on, but it differs from day to day depending on the threat, depending on what we're facing, and specifically who's in that position. We can't just take somebody with a pulse and put them in a chair. It doesn't work that way. You have to have the training, ability, and the legality to work in that position. So if we had somebody from Public Works come and pump a truck, it wouldn't work, just like we can't have somebody from the fire department go cutting checks to the finance department. Bad things would happen. So again, you have to have the proper training, be able to fill that position. There's a structure, or I see a structure chart for command and general staff. So this is operations level. Incident commander, public information officer, liaison officer, and then the specific general staff, so ops chief, so people that are swinging axes are actually doing search and rescue planning, so depending on the size of the incident, logistics, what do we need and how can we get them, and then finance, how can we pay for it. Not every single incident is going to require this level of scale. Again, if it's small, we may only have 2 people. If it's large, we may have 40. So this is just a general structure, general wire chart. This is a more, like I said, we can scale it up. This is a more complex wire chart. Specifically says, or it says basically the exact same thing, just more in depth, depending on the size.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
That's okay.
You gonna call already?
All right.
Emergency.
So depending again on the complexity, from a car crash all the way up to looks like the Murrah building bombing, we use the exact same plan, exact same wording, verbiage, tactical channels. It's already planned out. So when we face that incident, we don't have to say, okay, now what do we do? If we had to do that, we wouldn't be very effective. Oop, back up. All right, city manager and department heads. So city manager and department heads provide policy guidance on priorities and objectives. So master planning, working with the EOP, saying who has the ability to do what, who has the responsibility to do what, who oversees what. Supports the staff and the EOC, helps assist with decisions as far as direction of the incident. Though the fire chief or police chief, whoever is actually running the operations, maintains operational command, city managers and department heads help coordinate to move in the right direction. Incident management roles, again, talking about operations on the left. Management manages the incident, keeps the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, informed on all important matters pertaining to the incident. So you have a forward command that reports back to the Emergency Operations Center. Emergency Operations Center is like the heart of the actual mission. So they talk to the boots on the ground, which moves it to, or which passes the information to aldermen, the mayor, anybody else, utility companies. So all the stakeholders in the group. President or HSPD 8 specifically says it should be a community response. So everybody's involved, all stakeholders. All right, elected official roles and responsibilities. So where you guys come in. Primary function is facilitate information. If something happens, again, the tornado rolls through Rolling Meadows, you know your wards. You know the people that you work with. We're a community for a reason. You know them by their first names. It's imperative that you pass the information to us on what you guys need. Just like we're going to pass the information down to you on where your reunification centers might be, how we can get you information, how we can get you, food, water, whatever that might be. So you are key. You're our lifeline, really, because we are going to be, again, we're going to be exceeding our surge capacity for up to 96 hours before, large-scale relief comes. 96 hours, think about that. Food, water, medications, anything like that. So that's really imperative that we work together. Review and understand emergency operations plans. Making sure we have the legality to do the things that we need to do, as well as the ability to do those things. So whether that's manning, memorandums of understanding with, say, Lowe's or any other store that has something that we might need to use to board up, or gasoline, fuel for our rigs, whatever that might be. Obtain and understand how to use NIMS properly. So where you fall into that section, make sure that we're trained to that ability. So if we do go ask for reimbursement, we're all covered. Mayor holds overall responsibility for command and operations. Congratulations, sir. No pressure.
Well, Mr. Dwyer, I assure you I've done my local level training.
Yes, sir.
And I know that the basic message is find out who the incident commander is and stay the heck out of his way. So I've learned.
You know what? I think that the city of Rolling Meadows has an excellent working, honestly has a great working relationship with one another. And as far as emergency management goes, we actually have one of the person who chartered IPW Man, which is the Public Works Mutual Aid Response, Don Wenzel. If you ever get a chance to talk to him, pick his brain. He's very well known for that.
I second that.
Yes, sir. All right, and it's. You actually hold the authority to declare a disaster. So for us, again, to move it up the food chain, so to speak, to get reimbursement, to get assistance, we would have to have you do that. Now, whether we get that reimbursement depends on a financial threshold that FEMA specifically says. So we have to meet ours, then county has to meet theirs, and the state has to meet theirs, and then the feds get to decide if it all comes down. So it's kind of like a domino effect. This one falls, they all fall. this one never gets righted, only these 3 will fall, and then the money comes back. Again, it falls back to the local municipality. So we like to have our ducks in a row, our dominoes lined up, so if it happens, everybody's happy. All right, so recommended training. I can forward this all to you in emails, anything of that nature that you would need. Please come talk to us. If you need anything, we're more than happy to help. So if you, what I want you to leave you with is, when you think of emergency management, think of bricks, okay? Think of a brick wall. Each individual brick is a city department. So you have finance, you have police, you have fire, public works, whatever that might be. We're not a brick. We are the grout that goes in between that helps everything work together. Using that same example, think of different municipalities in the area. Each municipality is a brick. Well, our memorandums of understandings and our mutual aid agreements through MABUS, ILEAS, IPW, MAN, and just handshake agreements. We help you, you help us. We're right next to each other. Again, community. It's the same kind of thing. We're that grout that holds those bricks together. So if anything does happen, we're all in it together. So thank you very much.
Any questions for Firefighter Dwyer? Mr. Cannon.
Thanks.
Sir.
Just out of curiosity, so name an incident that we would have here. If we had an incident, who would contact us? Barry?
Chief?
Just in general. I mean, it doesn't. I'm not trying to pin you down. I'm just. Would someone call us or let us know? I mean,
typically what we've done, if you go back to the flooding that we had in 2008, that was one of the responsibilities that we let you guys know what was going on, that the EOC was activated. But again, we do try to make sure that you know what's going on. But at the same point in time, once the activation happens, how we're running it and how we're administering each of those different sections.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the other part of that question is then. So the police department obviously be involved with this also, right?
Every department is involved and every group is involved in the city.
We have internally, if we reach the threshold of let's open the EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Center, then what happens is the department heads and the city manager report to the Emergency Operations Center, again, just to be the facilitators of resources. We will have our boots on the ground in the street, and the last time was a flooding event, I think, was when we've had this a couple times here in Rolling Meadows where, Public Works is working, police are working, fire are working out in the street, and the department heads and city manager are that link between I'm thinking of the terminal for resource requests. So the resource requests from the field come to the Emergency Operations Center, and then we have several options to get those resources. Again, whether it's through ILEAS, IPW, MAN, MABUS, those are our options. In a certain situation, those resources may be tied up. Again, depending on the scale of the incident, they might not be available for a time. That's why we're talking about this 72 to 96 hour self-sufficiency goal. And then the other option would be we go up through the county then. So that would be we request resources from the county. They would go to the state. At some point, we may say we need to make this a disaster declaration, and you would certainly be the linchpin for that. And then other than that, to answer your question, it's really the city manager that then has the responsibility to make sure that information is going where it needs to be, which would certainly be to the elected officials.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Jett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there, I've just thought about some of the things you were saying, and if we were to get, let's say, a tornado or a plane crash, something, an airliner, unfortunately nowadays there's a lot of people that do things that aren't the right things to do. And so do we have points of contacts, or should we have points of contacts, either knowing that one of these 3 gentlemen from the police or fire are going to be calling you, and or here's your contact. In other words, I could get somebody out of the blue calling me up and say, hey, I'm Sergeant so-and-so from Rolling Meadows Police. We just had this big problem, and here's the information. And now I'm giving out inaccurate information to people because I got it from somebody that I thought was associated with us, or vice versa. I call and I can't get through to somebody, and, you guys are like, oh, yeah, guy claims he's an alderman. I don't know who he is. And, do we have like a list of people, or should we have a list of people that each one of us, each alderman says, okay, you've got these 5 firefighters or 5 police officers or whatever. Barry might be on vacation, or the chief might, and then, we really don't know who to talk to, or, they might not know that we're calling. And, I'm sure if you and I had a conversation on the phone, you might not, you take my word that I'm Alderman Judd, but you don't really know, right? And so if there's a certain person, should we have that? Should that be a setup, or is that a setup that I just don't know about, or? I don't know. I'm just thinking something major like a tornado that hits Palatine, Arlington, and Rolling Meadows. You get a ton of people here.
Yeah, for us, I'm not aware of a thing that's in place, because for us, it gets treated like a department. And so, sort of, kind of, I call you guys or shoot you something over the phone and say so-and-so will contact you. But they try to plan for lots of contingencies. I'm not really sure that's one of them.
Yeah, typically.
I don't know that it should be. I'm just asking. I'm just thinking out loud of something, major happens. How do we know who we're talking to? How do you know who you're talking to?
Typically, the municipality has a PIO, public information officer. Typically, that would be the manager or other individuals. That's the uniform message that would be getting out about here's what's happening with the city, here's what's going on. Typically, what we've done and what we had during the flooding in 2008, it was the responsibility of the manager and the assistant to actually give feedback to the alderman, but also making sure that the uniform conversation and press releases or any other pieces were coming straight from the PIO. So anything that was coming from the manager or the assistant to anybody on the council was the same kind of level conversation that we're having with anybody else. So again, you're not getting misinformation, or it might be a little dated, maybe a stream, but we're trying to give out the best and the most uniform to everybody at the same time.
Okay. I'm just thinking something major and chaotic. Flooding obviously is chaotic for the people involved in it, but a plane crash is going to be much more chaotic, or a tornado is going to be much more chaotic and scope, I would think. So I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah. Any incident from a house fire up to potential plane crash, we're going to be following chain of command, and your point of contact, I believe, is actually the city manager. So as the information goes up, it also goes back down through that same chain. And like Barry was saying, public information officer, that's the person that you want to go to. That's where you're going to get your information from. That is actually approved releases.
So for us, it's pretty much you two. Okay, just making sure.
Further questions? Then seeing none, we'll call that the conclusion of item 2.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you very much, gentlemen.
Sorry.
Another PowerPoint?
Yes, one more.
All
If we
right.
can have, probably another 15, 20 minutes, then we'll be wrapped up here with our next item.
And we've done the soft shoe before, trying to get between different agenda items and so forth and so on.
Yes.
There we go. All right, Chief, item number 3.
Thank you. And this is, again, another update. Now, it's kind of become an annual thing, not that it was necessarily designed or has to remain that way in the future. But, as you know, for some time we've been working on what we affectionately call our RPM, functional consolidation, for lack of a better word, operation between our neighboring fire departments. So, again, that's the Palatine Municipal Fire Department, the Palatine Rural Fire Protection District, and the Rolling Meadows Fire Department. We've been working for several years to see what we can do and where there are opportunities for us to be better. And being better was one of the first discussions we had as the chiefs of those 3 organizations got together and said, what are we looking to do? And we really came up with these guiding principles that we have used, to really be the values behind all of our decisions. And it's right there: a higher level of service to the community, more safety or better safety for our firefighters when they do their job, and then increased operational efficiency across the 3 jurisdictions. So if I can get my pointer to work, there we go. So again, I'm not going to read all of these, but our accomplishments, really what I want to point out on this slide is it's almost 4 years to the day that we really started this with some shared staffing arrangement with Rolling Meadows and the Palatine Rural Fire Protection District. And From that was born this RPM concept. What we've really done over the last 4 years, there's a number of things, but it's really all focused, or the best our emphasis has really been on training. We've had a lot of opportunities, and we've really put a lot of emphasis on training our crews to work together, to work better, and to work in unison. And you may recall at the bottom there, 2015, a year ago, we established that fire marshal position. Was again one of the issues that or the benefits or accomplishments we talked about last year. We've been using that shared fire marshal position now for a year, and it's been working well for us. And so going into 2016 now, some of the things that I just wanted to highlight for us is we're continuing the progress and development of what we affectionately call our FOG manual, or the Field Operation Guide. We started with a single family structure and applying guidelines that all of our firefighters across the 3 jurisdictions have now been made aware of through classroom training and practical training. And then we've expanded that over the last few years. We've expanded that recently into special teams operations, and in larger buildings, high-rise commercial, and more complicated structures. And so we've been training on that and had that in place for probably 4 or 5 months now, and that's really going to continue to be our emphasis in 2016. A couple other things that are really new this year, that equipment consolidation is really a committee we put together that we're calling our standardization committee, and they're really looking to standardize the equipment we buy, again, because to help meet those 3 guiding principles. If we use the same style and brand of air pack, if we use the same style and brand of extrication equipment, when the crews are working together, they're just going to be able to do a better job and be able to do it more efficiently and more safely. So, and really that concept of standardization in equipment can really expand to almost an endless degree in the future, but we like to, crawl before we walk, before we run. But we may be looking down the road at, standardizing our policies, our response protocols. There's a lot of things that we can look at in terms of standardization up and beyond just equipment, but that's certainly what we're going to focus on initially to get this up and running in 2016. The other thing that I think is really going to pay off over the years for us is a critique committee. It's a group of individuals from all 3 of the shared department or the combined departments who are charged with evaluating incidents that might occur in one jurisdiction on one shift, taking the information of what occurred, whether that is a challenging auto extrication or a house fire, or certainly any type of a structure fire, a significant incident that meets a threshold that warrants attention. That critique committee is charged with gathering information, looking at those run reports, taking photographs if they have to, and then turning that into a training document, and then a document that we can actually put in a library so that we increase the level of industrial knowledge and experience among our firefighters. You gain experience from every incident you respond to as a firefighter. So if there's, again, one shift and a certain number of crews that went to house fire, there's going to be lessons learned. We want to use this critique committee as an avenue to take that information, those lessons learned, and share that with everyone in our 3 communities to make us better. And then the last thing that we're just kicking off the ground now is combining our fire investigation team. Fire investigators also get better with experience. There are also some newly implemented training requirements, and that's what's one of my refresher training requirements, not necessarily initial requirements. There's some refresher training requirements for people who hold the fire investigation certification from the Office of the State Fire Marshal, and so there's the ability to get training credit and get experience by working together and expanding the ability for our fire investigators to practice that craft by investigating incidents in other jurisdictions beside our own. So those are the things that we're working on in 2016. A couple more really, and then to get into what I really want to talk about tonight, the other thing that we're working on again in 2016 is training. That's always been our central focus. We have a training committee that has been in play for 3 or 4 years now, and just over the turn of 2015 to 2016, we did implement new members from all 3 departments into that training committee that's running our training training and overseeing our training for all 3 departments. Again, we're trying to train as one 8-station fire department, and we've been doing that for several years now as much as possible. A big thing in 2016 is we had a new software program, which is really a communication tool to allow us to schedule, store data, and keep the records of our training, and it's been a tool that works again across all 3 jurisdictions, as has been working pretty well for us. So we like that's been a good tool for us in terms of communication more than anything else. And some ongoing training efforts, newly implemented field operation guide that we talked about, the large scale incidents, and then the usual stuff, the stuff that we're mandated to train on every year, such as CPR recertification, EMS training, our self-contained breathing apparatus training, driver's training, engineers training. So there's a myriad of training items that we're required to complete by one overseeing agency or another that we will continue to work on. And then what I really wanted to talk about, what we knew would happen and what we are seeing happen with training as one fire department, are some logistical challenges that have emerged. So currently, between our 3 organizations, we have EMS training every Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are really designated our hardcore firefighter training days. Weekends, and then on Monday we have other inspections and in-depth vehicle checks and some other issues that we do logistically. But when we're trying to get our training completed on those Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Fridays, we're trying to get 8 stations and 15 crews to have meaningful training where they're working together and trying to be as realistic as possible. Whereas previous, 5 years ago, when we were the Rolling Meadows Fire Department operating individually, we had to train 2 stations and 4 crews. So our typical training, 5-10 years ago was bring the crews to Station 15. It's somewhat centrally located in our community, and we'll get our training done. If we have to break off, we break off. Logistically, trying to get 15 crews from 8 stations through these training operations and holding training operations that are more complex, because we're expanding our training guides to go into what does the 3rd, 4th engine, 3rd ambulance on the scene do on a fire situation, and practice that is a bit more challenging, coupled with the challenge of then, while you're training a portion of those crews, you have to cover a larger geographical area, because we're talking about 3 communities now. So we've used Station 84 with the Palatine Fire Department, which is on Illinois Avenue, kind of as really our central point. It has a classroom, it has a training tower. It's somewhat centrally located in our jurisdiction for training. But as we're having either a third of our crews or sometimes half of our crews engaged in this training scenario, the challenge then becomes, it puts a strain on our ability to cover the rest of the community with those remaining crews, specifically if we start having multiple calls at the same time. And so that's something that we've been watching very closely. It's something that, again, is something we knew would happen in what we're trying to do. And we're trying to manage the risk of minimizing the strain on our system in terms of the requirements, or in terms of requests for 911 and what will or may come in, with the risk of not allowing our crews to complete their training. So we got that balance of, we want to get our crews trained and have it meaningful training, and then make sure that we can do whatever we do to avoid a delay response, because those crews are doing that. And it is a challenge that we knew we'd have and we're looking at. So we're taking some steps, and the one big step I want to talk about in 2016 to try to minimize the risk from that training and of that delayed response, and yet continue the benefits from the training, is we've recently altered our activated fire alarm response. And before I talk about that, I just want to give some quick definitions up there at the top. So working down, what we call an AFA is an activated fire alarm response. And so all of those definitions, at AFA, Code 3, Code 4, box alarm, those are all reasons that a fire station will be toned out for a call. So an AFA, we consider as an activated fire alarm, is an alarm in a building that by ordinance or fire code is connected directly to Northwest Central Dispatch Center. So an AFA is different than the smoke detector in your house. An AFA is when the alarm goes off, there is a signal sent to our dispatch center, and they tone out the fire department to respond to that activated fire alarm. And per our fire code, those are our multifamily buildings. They're the large, what am I thinking of, the commercial buildings and industrial buildings. And so these aren't your typical single-family homes or even your smaller townhomes. So these are apartment buildings and commercial buildings. And again, all of those by code are connected to Northwest Central. So when the fire alarm goes off there, we get dispatched. When the alarm goes off in your house, that's what we call a local alarm. It alerts the residents to get out of the house because something's happening, but we won't respond unless they call 911. And if it's a local alarm that isn't connected to the dispatch center, and we won't respond until someone calls 911. So if you walk out of your house, call 911 and say, my smoke detector went off and there's smoke in my kitchen or something's going on, we will be dispatched, but we won't be dispatched for an activated alarm. We will be dispatched for what we call a Code 3, a reported structure fire. And so that's, again, a dispatch code that tells us what we're responding to, which is different than an AFA when we hear that over the radio or see it on our computer. And then the Code 4 is a confirmed structure fire. Not much difference between a Code 3 and a Code 4, other than that's when we have either a police or fire officer on the scene saying, yes, in fact, we do have, smoke and fire showing from this building. It's not, steam from the dryer vent in November, which happens on occasion. And then the box alarm is the next level up, where we can go to a first, second, third, fourth alarm box to get, 40, 50 fire crews to our scene if we have to. So again, just to touch on those definitions, I know it's a little winded, but it's important for what we're going to talk about here. The AFA indicates a certain alarm response in terms of number of crews. Code 3 is a few more crews. Code 4 is a few more crews, and then a box alarm gets bigger and bigger and bigger as we go down. So each of those levels elicits more response from more crews to that scene, whether it's Rolling Meadows crews or crews through our auto aid and mutual aid agreement. So that's important in talking about this discussion, because what we're going to talk about right now is AFAs, or activated fire alarms. And again, those are simply those calls that the alarm goes off and we are dispatched automatically into a commercial or a multifamily building. And so at the bottom of this slide, you see prior to 2016, our activated fire response was 2 engines, an ambulance, and a shift commander. And those rigs could come from the city of Rolling Meadows, or depending on where the alarm is in our community, from a combination of Rolling Meadows crews and our auto aid crews, Arlington Heights or Palatine. What we've just changed within the last month now is we've downgraded that response to an activated fire alarm to 1 engine and 1 shift commander. And so a more appropriate way to put that is to say we are not sending 1 engine and 1 ambulance to those calls today as we were a month ago. And we did that to relieve that strain that we were talking about on the system when we're trying to combine this training together. And this has been done across those RPM communities. Palatine's doing this, Palatine Rural is doing this also. And of course, this is the right or wrong thing to do. That's not the way we operate in our world. Everything is risk management, and everything has benefits and risks associated with it. So one of the benefits, and there's a list of benefits from downgrading this response, and there's also some risks. So going from the top down on this slide, I'll just cover real quick, some of the benefits of sending an engine and a shift commander as opposed to, 2 engines, an ambulance, and a shift commander, and keeping back an engine and an ambulance. There's obviously less wear and tear, lower risk of vehicle accidents because those vehicles aren't on the road. And then the big one is that increased our ability of those crews to do a couple things. One being the standard of cover. And that was what I kind of talked about in terms of being able to remain back to cover the community and or participating in some of those other things we do. Public education, vehicle equipment maintenance, our daily chores, inspections, etc. And then other emergencies. And I really say that with an asterisk because our fire officers and firefighters have always been thinking, intelligent professionals, and I want you to realize that they've always had the ability to call audibles on the run. So in other words, if we were sending 2 engines, an ambulance, and a shift commander to an activated fire alarm, and a call came in for a heart attack or someone choking, there's always the ability of that crew, either the shift commander or from a prompt from one of his crew, to say over the radio, Northwest Central, divert this ambulance from this activated fire alarm to that call, because it's a risk-benefit advantageous to the community to send that rig to that call and then replace it with a backup rig. So they're available for other emergencies. They always were available, but now they're spread out per se in the community, whether they're at training or in station, as opposed to all responding to one single location in the community. So we see that benefit, and it all starts with the Center for Public Safety Excellence talks about a community risk assessment and this concept of standards of cover, which is really a process where running a fire department involves, number one, assessing the risk in your community, and we pretty much know what that is in terms of our life safety risk in the community. The next step is then evaluate your resources, your crews, your people, your stations, your station location, the other conversation that we're having, and then managing or matching that resources to those risks, all under the universe or within the universe of the community expectations. Alderman Badger, thank you, sorry. Alderman Badger has been fond of telling me that, in his Iowa life that, there's typically 20, 30-minute responses from their fire department, but it's accepted with their community. But that's not acceptable in the community of Rolling Meadows. And then the big thing that, again, we're available for now is training, and we talked about that. And so the Altered AFA response does come with this risk then of having less crews responding to this alarm activation, but we feel that the gain from having them available for those other things listed up there is worth that risk. And we're willing to pursue that path. And some other factors that I want to throw in here is, number one is the data. We do try to be data-driven. 2014 and 2015, we had 1,161 activated fire alarm incidents, and of those incidents, only 8 were upgraded to Code 3 response, or in other words, a reported fire, and none of them were upgraded to a confirmed structure fire Code 4 response. That doesn't mean we didn't have any of those calls in 2014 and 2015. It just means that they didn't get dispatched as AFAs. They were dispatched as either a reported fire or someone from the fire department seeing it as a confirmed fire. So we did have incidents, but the AFA incidents, for the most part, turned out to be false alarm. And talking to chiefs in the area, that's pretty consistent, and the national average is about 3% of activated fire alarms that actually turn into actual fires. So we're pretty confident that we're looking at somewhere between 1 and 3% over an extended length of time of those incidents that will actually turn into fire. So that helps us, understanding this risk, and helps us more comfortable in accepting this risk. There is a huge danger that I have to throw out that, just because something happens with low frequency doesn't mean that, we shouldn't be prepared. It doesn't mean that this only happens 3% of the time, so we only have to be 3% of the prepared, because, when that incident happens, and even if it's a 1 in 3% chance, it is going to happen at some point in time, and the community will expect us to perform there. But again, accepting this risk due to the data, due to the fact that those crews that aren't responding are able to, provide better coverage to the community, to be able to complete the training that makes them better and safer and meets those guiding principles, providing better service, and then, allows them to do public education, some of those other things we need to do. We're able to accept that risk. And then one more thing I wanted to touch on before we finish up here is we also looked at further mitigating the risk of that AFA turning into a structure fire and having us be ready. And we did that by utilizing a concept of expanding our concept of what we call a target hazard. In the fire service, a target hazard is basically a building that poses a greater life safety risk than another building. On the simple common sense thought that not all buildings are the same. A vacant warehouse with one ambulatory healthy person in it is a different risk in terms of life safety to fire than a nursing home. So with that in mind, we've always had buildings in our community that we've identified as target hazards that have had a higher response than that AFA response in terms of number of equipment, just because of that risk. And so while we've actually altered slightly our target hazard response, also we've currently calling our target hazard response 2 engines, 1 ambulance, and 1 shift commander, which was, as you may recall, our previous AFA response. And then we've expanded that number of target hazards based on the buildings in our community that we feel pose a significant life safety risk, and as well as unique to our community is some of the areas that we have a response time risk. So we've changed some of our target hazards, increased that number so that we are still sending 2 engines, 1 ambulance, and 1 shift commander to the structures that we feel are really at risk. So those mitigation factors, we again allow us to feel comfortable with our downgraded AFA response to help us meet our training needs and those other needs. And of course, our greatest mitigation, I have to brag a little bit, is always our people. You know, we have thinking, intelligent professionals that are empowered to make good decisions. And so we're confident that, when that 1 or 3% occurs, that our crews will upgrade the alarm as fast as possible and make good decisions once they arrive on the scene. So, and that statement up there is right out of our fire department vision statement, and it basically just confirms for us and proclaims to the community that, we're a progressive organization. We commit to exist in a state of perpetual growth with a desire really not only to meet but to exceed the expectations of the community. So that's my update for RPM. And again, this is something that I had talked to the city manager about and really wanted to make you aware of our change with this activated fire alarm response.
Questions for the chief? Mr. Cannon.
Not many questions, but it's the comment. Chief, I just like to, from a small voice over in Ward 1, I just like to compliment you on the direction you're bringing the department. It looks like you're really trying to keep our costs down, make us work smarter and better, I guess. But I really appreciate your efforts, so I'd love to see the same kind of effort from our other departments if they could do things with our neighbors to make us more efficient and share resources and things. I just think it's a wonderful direction you're bringing things. And thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Anything else for the chief? Then seeing none, we'll call that the conclusion of item 3. There's a request to go into closed session this evening for 2 batches of union negotiations. It does require a formal motion and a roll call vote. Therefore, is there a motion to go into closed session for 2 purposes under subsection C, something of the Illinois Open Meetings Act?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon has made the motion and it has been seconded. Is there any discussion?
Sorry.
Then seeing none, the question is, shall the council enter closed session? The clerk will please call the roll.
Cannon?
Yes.
Prana?
Okay.
Majakis?
Yes.
Judd?
Yes.
Banjer?
Yes.
Diestis?
No.
Veenbos?
Yes.
No, see, Dan.
With 6 in favor and 1 opposed, the council will now enter closed session under subsection C2 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act. Members of the audience and of the press are advised that we do not expect to take any action upon returning to open session.